I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. The mission of the center is to catalyze innovation in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry for a better tomorrow for all people. So we thank you for joining us today. We'd like to take a moment to express our gratitude to the many sponsors who make our work possible. Thank you. Before we get started with today's presentation, I'd like to tell you about another project that the Center for Innovation is working on. The Center's Board of Directors are working in partnership with a Ukrainian nonprofit organization called Dobrobot. They do emergency repairs to homes and hospitals damaged by Russian attacks. Dobrobot has requested that CFI present innovative ideas for Ukrainian reconstruction to local and national government leaders on July 28th in Keil. Courageous leaders in Ukraine have been tasked by President Zelensky to not only repair infrastructure damaged by the war, but also begin planning for peacetime reconstruction. Estimates of the reconstruction costs are close to $500 million, making this the biggest opportunity for large-scale innovation in our industry since World War II. The free conference will be live streamed with a simultaneous English translation, should you care to join us. The registration link is in the chat box. Now, for the event you've been waiting for. Before I introduce our speaker, let me note a couple of things. First, we hope this will be an interactive session. Today's speaker is going to ask some questions, so please use the chat box to respond and add any of your own questions. Phil's talk is divided into 4 sections, and he will take questions at the end of each section. Finally, remember that this section will be recorded and placed on YouTube, so please don't say anything that would embarrass your mom. Today, we are delighted to hear from Keil, the founder and chief strategy officer at Disrupt Collaborative. He's a strategy consultant leveraging a unique blend of expertise to drive purpose and performance in the AEC industry. With a history of transforming organizations from small teams to billion-dollar companies, he specializes in designing ambitious strategic plans. Phil's thesis is that artificial intelligence is more than just a tech fad. It's a transformative force that's reshaping industries worldwide. AI offers the opportunity to drive sustainable innovation and redefine our built environment. Today, he will explore how AI can streamline design, enhance construction efficiency, and foster resilience in infrastructure. Phil will also share some thoughts about creating a robust strategy to effectively integrate AI into your business model. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Margie. It's great to be here. Thanks for the kind introduction. So welcome. Happy Friday. Really excited to share what I have to share with you today. As Margie mentioned, I want this to be a bit interactive. So the title of the webinar here, AI and AEC, Charting the Course for Innovation. There are several different components here, starting from a little bit of a definitional perspective to what the current state is, and transforming into what do I do with this? You know, I don't want to just leave you with a bunch of interesting thoughts, although we may end up there. I want it to be a conversation. I want it to be something that you can take something away from it, where you have a structure, a framework, a process that you can think through, and a couple of tools maybe that you can implement in your own firm that'll allow you to think through this entire process at a very high level. And so let's make this conversational if we can. I'm not the authority on any of this information. It is so new, it's so rapidly evolving that there are things I'm sure that I'm not seeing, that you're seeing, and there's a lot of debate that's being had on a lot of these topics. And so I know Margie's going to help ask questions along the way, but I certainly encourage anyone at any point, not just at the end of each section, to raise questions, and we'll do our best to get to all of those answers. And if we don't get to everything that I have to share today, I will certainly be willing to share some additional information. I'll share the PowerPoint presentation as well. And I think it's more important maybe to have the conversation and answer the questions than it is to make sure that we hit every slide. So some of it I'll go pretty quickly, slow me down, ask questions as we go along. But let's jump right into it. And starting off the theme of conversational, I wanted to jump right into a question. What inspires you? So I'll give you a minute to think about that. And I'd like to see some chats and some Q&A boxes being populated here about what is inspirational to you. There are a couple quotes that I thought I'd start us off with. One by Thomas Jefferson says, "Question with boldness even the very existence of God, for surely if there be a God, he'd rather the homage of honest questioning than that of blindfolded fear." And I think that's so much what we're doing here with AI is asking questions. And are we asking the right questions? Are we asking the oughts and the shoulds and all of those things that really underpin our ability to wrap our minds around what this topic is about and how do we use it in our day-to-day, not just something that's interesting that other people are dealing with. The second quote I really like, as I think it relates very closely with what we do on strategic planning and thinking strategically as organizations and as individuals, both in our personal lives and professional lives. It's a T.E. Lawrence quote. And I was working with a firm in Dubai in last October, and about a 500-person A&E firm. And at the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, I saw this quote, and through this entire process, they were explaining how this massive monument got constructed, and this T.E. Lawrence quote really stood out to me. And it goes a little something like this, and I'm sure I'll butcher it a little bit here, but it's all men dream, but not equally. Those that dream in the dusty recesses of their minds at night awake to find that it was vanity, that their dreams have evaporated before their eyes. But those that dream during the day, these are the dangerous men, for they can act and plan to turn their dreams into reality. And that's exactly what I want us to do. I want to think about, I want to encourage you to be dreamers. Right? I want to encourage you to be thinking larger than you thought before. The innovation that's going to happen over the next year is going to be so much more rapid than we've seen even in the last 10 years, even in the last 50 years. It's going to happen so quickly that I couldn't honestly sit here and tell you that I have a very good understanding of what the world is going to look like in December of 2023, sitting here already in July. I can make guesses, and plenty of others are making guesses as well. I think the opportunity is really astounding, and it's incredible. And there's a lot of fear mongering, of course, but there is, to me, a lot of opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. Answered, inspired by the knowledge of my hard work helps to make people's lives better. It's an incredible answer. It's one of the reasons why I love this industry and working in this industry is the people are so incredible and they're doing great things. Unfortunately, we're not great advocates for ourselves. And anywhere you sit in this industry, if you're adjacent to it, directly involved as an architect, engineer, construction professional, or an investor, there's not necessarily movies being written about our industry. The titans and the heroes are not necessarily in the space, and I hope to be a small part in changing that. Well, let's continue on. And hopefully the chat and the Q&A will get a little bit easier to go as we go. So this is the basic rough outline here. I'll talk a little bit about my journey so far, a little bit about how AI is transforming the AEC industry. Again, we're going to stick to a very high level. We have a very limited amount of time. Would be happy to continue to talk about this and to dive into detail on any component of it at a future date if there's interest. But we're going to talk briefly about a few of the things that we mentioned in the session description, again, at a very high level. And then we're going to dive into what I think is very interesting, which are questions and challenges with AI. I think there are more questions and challenges at the moment than answers, and making sure that we're focused on the right things is going to be important. For example, there's a bunch of Google ethicists right now that are asking for a 6-month pause on the development of AI. And I'll talk a little bit about the reason behind that. I think that's very unlikely for a number of reasons. But I think I use that as an example to underpin, these are the things that are happening right now, and nobody has a complete set of answers and visibility, as we won't, as we progress forward. And so being able to understand the framework that you take to solve problems and solve challenges and answer questions with limited information is going to be an important skill set for all of us to develop as leaders in this space. And then it'll feel very different as we transition to these last 2 bullet points, and really just the second to last one there, creating a robust strategy for innovation, integrating AI. This is where we're going to switch the presentation from more of an informational, kind of interest generating, definitional kind of presentation, more to here are some ways to think about creating strategy, specifically as it relates to innovation. Integrating AI is just one version or one possibility for innovation in strategy. So we'll talk a little bit about culture, we'll talk about leadership skills, we'll talk about frameworks, structures, systems that you can take away and then really maybe think through your individual set of circumstances and your individual kind of custom, unique firm, the things that you do, because talking at a very general level, oftentimes has limited use. And then we'll wrap things up, hopefully, with a discussion about the future of AEC with AI. And that will be truly a discussion. I have one slide. It's really more of a prompt slide for us to kickstart a conversation, because I have some thoughts about how that's going to occur. And I hope you bring some thoughts about what you're seeing as well. Okay, so who am I? This is the most boring part of my presentation, at least for me. So I've taken an interesting path, and it's touched a lot of different areas of expertise. My educational background is in chemical engineering and physics, particularly biophysics. And then I went back to school to get an MBA in entrepreneurship and innovation. And things have, I guess, to summarize all of it, is kind of this insatiable curiosity on learning a large corpus of information. I just find various things fascinating. And so I haven't gone extraordinarily deep. I would probably describe myself as a polymath in some ways, where I'm kind of good at a lot of different things, and I'm really good at a couple of things, but I wouldn't consider myself the foremost expert in necessarily anything. I've spent time in the U.S. Air Force, weapons standardization, writing safety and protocols and loading munitions for F-15s primarily. I've worked as an improvement engineer for Dow Chemical. I've done sales and supply chain strategies for Keurig. I've started a couple companies of my own, including Disrupt Collaborative, which is the newest venture, co-founder of Disrupt Collaborative, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But the other startups I've done a medical device company. We were treating major depressive disorder through a combination of EEG and transcranial magnetic stimulation. Also a brewery carbonation tech business. If any of you have friends that are chemical engineers, it seems like the popular thing to do to get involved in brewing in some way, shape, or form. For the last 7 years or so, I've spent my time working on strategies, working on strategic planning with the AEC space. So in about that time frame, we've worked on over 250 engagements of different sizes and scope, some full strategic plans, both research and all the way through implementation, and some of them that are very specific use cases, things like organizational structure designs, things like board of directors, searches, and things like that are very specific implementation focused kind of activities. Smallest firm I think that I've worked with on something like that is 12 people. The largest firms have been in the billions of dollars and thousands of people. And so bring a little bit of a perspective, but it's not I would say I'm still striving to understand more about how the space works, how we can transform and evolve strategy going forward. And so we'll start a conversation on that together and utilize AI, at least in this conversation, to do it. So Disrupt Collaborative. Real quickly, this is it. This is what we're trying to achieve. Right? This is the purpose, is to unlock the potential of every individual organization with the AEC universe. And we're trying to inspire others to go places they can't or won't go on their own. And our thesis around leadership involves our core values. And so that is really, that purpose statement is built on our thesis of leadership. What makes a good leader is someone that inspires others to go places they can't or won't go on their own, doing that in a collaborative way and uncompromising on certain values: integrity, competence, compassion, and courage. And there's a lot to that. This isn't a sales pitch for Disrupt, but there's a lot of really cool things that I think we're going to be doing over the next several years that we're hoping to get everyone involved with and start a conversation on. So exploring artificial intelligence. What is it? There's a lot of definitions, as we'll explore in just a minute. There's just so much potential. There's so much opportunity. It's so new. It's one of those technologies that you look at AI, right? You look at the metaverse stuff that had, almost seems like it's burnt out. NFTs and the metaverse was really popular. There's a lot of really interesting things that are going on with that. There was a Tower in Babel. There was an architecture firm that worked on the Tower of Babel, is what they called it. It was their metaverse in Dubai, and it was, incredible things that are going on in that space. Yet to this day, you're getting people that are describing themselves as metaverse architects. But I would describe it as like the MS-DOS version, or maybe even earlier than that, is in terms of where we are in the development cycle. And so it's easy to laugh at. It's easy to look back at some of the commercials and some of the news programs back in the day, what is www dot? What is that? What is the World Wide Web? And those kinds of things, the questions and the pushback and the concerns that we were having at that time frame. I've used that frequently as a counterbalance to this. And what I think is coming next when we're talking about artificial intelligence and what's going to be the next great leap forward for it, in addition to other things that we'll discuss, is quantum computing. And we won't get into that because that's also very at early development stages. But if you know anything about quantum computing and the potential as well as the challenges that presents, it is only going to significantly accelerate this, and that brings its own unique challenges in cybersecurity, just like AI does. But this is something that I think is worth exploring. It's worth having a conversation about. And one of the takeaways that I'll have for you at the end of the presentation today is that you need to involve yourself in the conversation. Whether you're actively using ChatGPT or other AI platforms, just know your people are. Whether they're using it for work, outside of work, whatever it is, there's a mass amount of interest in this. It's not going away. And I want to position ourselves, at least in this transformation, which I wrote an article at the end of last year, I've likened this transformation to an invention like the cotton gin or the Gutenberg press. It's going to be that transformational, in my opinion. And rather than taking the approach that we've taken so much historically of let's wait and see what happens to us, I want us to actively involve ourselves and be on the precipice, the forefront of this transformation, so that we can really capture it and create value within this space. So there's 3 definitions here, and I'm not going to read them. I've got an Oxford Dictionary, Investopedia Britannica, all attempting to take a shot at describing what the definition of artificial intelligence is. And it's this theory, it's a development, it's the simulation of human intelligence, but how does that actually occur? You can liken your brain to a computer, but that's a really poor analogy. And so what does it actually mean? What does artificial intelligence mean? What have we been calling artificial intelligence to this point? I would argue, and many others would argue, that it's not artificial intelligence. And there's plenty of people that are in this space actively working on these goals that wouldn't describe what we have now as artificial intelligence either. That it's something else altogether. It's not quite there. We're trying to generate hype instead of really truly having a precise definition of what this is. So I'll fall back to Ray Kurzweil, who I just think is kind of a fascinating guy. There's a lot of interesting, he was called Edison's rightful heir at one point. He's the futurist for Google. He was the head of their AI program for a long time. The reason he gained notoriety is because he's as a futurist, he's written a couple of books making predictions and was pretty good, as far as futurism goes. I don't recall the exact percentage of his first book. I know his latest book was not quite as impressive, his accuracy and some of the predictions he made in his latest book. But he's been somebody that has steeped his career in this, and he's kind of an eccentric individual. He takes, I think it's like 80 pills or 100 pills a day. He's trying to live to a certain period where he thinks the singularity is going to occur. And the singularity is that point in time where AI becomes as intelligent as human beings, kind of in a generalistic kind of way. It's not specific AI programs for specific use cases. So it's interesting how he approaches it and what he thinks is going to happen. There's also tons of problems with this gentleman. He kind of has this matter-of-fact approach of, everybody's going to want to integrate with computers, and everybody's going to want to integrate with AI at some point. He's got this transhumanism approach to this problem, and he can't really see a world where there are people that would choose to opt out of that. And so I think that's an interesting question that we can ask ourselves when we get into it, if anyone is interested in that question. But he defines artificial intelligence as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs, related to the similar task of using computers to understand human intelligence, but AI doesn't have to confine itself to methods that are biologically observable. So it's really kind of an interesting take on it. As we get into some of the definitions, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at a couple of things here. First, on the top of the page here is 3 different definitions: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforced learning. So supervised learning, if you don't want to read all the text that's there, is basically we've labeled a bunch of the right answers and you're just learning from all of the right answers. Unsupervised learning is kind of how it sounds. It's exactly the opposite of that. It's unlabeled data sets. It goes and explores and it tries to make predictions about what the next thing in the series should be. What is the answer? How do we approximate closer and closer to the right answer? And then reinforced learning, there's a rather technical definition there, but it's kind of a combination of the two. There's going to be an unlabeled data set. There's going to be a labeled data set where the scientists are actually going in and they are telling the AI program, this is right, this is not right, or they're labeling information. So it's kind of this mix between the uncharted territory and the body of current knowledge that we know, that we can know. And so when you look at the different types of machine learning, the reason I bring that up is because I think this is a very useful graphic from Rocket Source that breaks machine learning into the 3 main types. There are more types of machine learning that exist, but these are the 3 main types, and there are a ton of different algorithms as it relates to this. You can really get into a rabbit hole very, very quickly going down this route. But I think it's useful to demonstrate a couple of things. One is all of the different things they're doing with these different types of learning. So, and that kind of leads me to my second point, which is that at least in its current state, AI kind of has a very narrow band of expertise. You create an AI program specifically to address a specific problem. So whether that's weather forecasting, skill acquisition, robot navigation, maybe it's big data visualization, structure discovery, targeted marketing, and customer segmentation, it's very specifically trained on those things. And ChatGPT, some of these large language models, this generative AI is some of the terminology that you'll hear. It's starting to approach and approximate more of a generalistic type of intelligence, but it's really not there, not just yet anyway. So lots and lots of terms here. We're not going to go into it. This is one of the reference material slides that I'll provide to you. I'll touch on a couple of the things. I think I have 8 or 9 different terms here, and there's certainly hundreds more, but these are some of the important ones that you'll see and you may hear discussed as you talk about AI generally, which is, the top 2 I'll discuss because we've already started the conversation on that. So artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence, AGI versus ASI. What I talked about Ray Kurzweil and his description of the singularity, that is the point we achieve general intelligence. It's known as strong AI, and it means that it applies knowledge as effectively as a human. And there's some estimates right now that AI is basically at the level of a 25-year-old, 22, 25, somewhere in the mid-20s, where 3 years ago it was about at the intelligence level generally applicable of a 7-year-old. So in a 2 to 3 year period, it's kind of moved beyond that space, and it's only going to continue to do so at an increasing. It's a double exponential curve is kind of the description of how quickly this is happening. And this statistic is probably 3 months old at this point. I haven't seen an updated one yet, but at about 3 months ago, they did a study and they looked at how quickly is this doubling in power. So if anybody's familiar with that, Moore's law and how that, how technology is developed historically, how quickly is it doubling? And so they looked at that, and at the time it was every 48 hours. the power and the intelligence level of artificial intelligence was doubling at a rate of about 48 hours. Now that could very easily be much quicker at this point. But there have been some shackles placed on it. Of course, it hasn't been let free and let loose, and there's certain parameters it has to work within. And I think there are very good reasons for that. Artificial superintelligence, by contrast, is where it supersedes and the intelligence level of humans. It's kind of the analogy that many people are making around when AI achieves artificial superintelligence, we're basically going to be Neanderthals compared, to the humans we are today. And so we're going, and some have even gone further. It's like ants versus humans, right? And it's just so far above and beyond us that there's no way we could potentially compete. And so that's what leads to some of these concerns about AI taking over, and it's going to be our robot overlords. And then you have folks like Elon Musk, for example, that are taking a little bit of a different approach, that we need to each individually have our own artificial intelligence that is working in a way to combat all of the other artificial intelligences that are out there. So you need to kind of augment yourself in order to compete with artificial intelligence. But in order to do so, you need to own that, and you need to have complete autonomy. It has to be developed specifically for you, have loyalty to you, those kinds of things. And so there's, again, so many rabbit holes we can go down. As you look at some of these other ideas, neural networks, very interesting. It's kind of the backbone. It's this idea of trying to create algorithms that are designed to work like neurons within the human mind. And the Turing test is something that you might have run across previously. It's proposed by Alan Turing in 1950, and it's a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior that is indistinguishable from a human. So if somebody interacts with an AI program and they have no idea whether that's actually AI or it's human. And I believe it was 2019. I have to double check my dates, actually. I should have had that written down. I believe it was 2019. Google demonstrated, passed the Turing test. A lot of interesting things that Google did in 2019, particularly on quantum computing, where they developed or demonstrated quantum supremacy over a traditional supercomputer, and then just went dark for a number of years until the last year, when the CIA's investment fund decided to invest in it. They decided to spin it off as its own company. Lots of really interesting things going on there, but that's for another day. All right, so what does the landscape kind of look like right now? Largest AI companies are Google, X.AI is Elon Musk's, Microsoft has Copilot and OpenAI, Meta, NVIDIA has their own, Apple is working on these. Everybody seems to be working on them, right? And I've got a couple of questions in parentheses up there, and we'll touch on this a little bit more when we get into some of the challenges and questions that are being posed by AI. But if you've gone to business school, you may have seen this term before, this first mover advantage is what this is built on. And this is the underpinning theory that most of the companies, at least to this point, have taken this approach, is that whoever is going to be the first mover, whoever demonstrates supremacy with their AI program first, is going to be the one that rules it all. They're going to have a complete and utter monopoly over everything. And so we're going for speed over what my second question there is, the ought questions, the ethical implications of, we're so busy asking, can we do something? We're not asking, should we do something, right? And so that's why the Google ethicists are now taking a step back and quitting and trying to get the 6-month pause, is because there are a lot of problems with how something is trained, the biases and other challenges that we'll discuss, that having this right, to me, is the first step. You need to figure this piece of it out before you can move forward. But as you look down below to that second bullet point on the left-hand column, ChatGPT banned the military, but the Pentagon is using it and they're concerned. And so the reason I don't believe that there is going to be a 6-month pause is for 2 reasons. One is the military reason the Pentagon's concerned about is if we don't do it, China's going to do it, right? And then we're going to be subservient to another superpower in the world. And so it's just national security concerns. We can't take take the pedal, off the metal there, if you will. And so that's one of them. The other one is something that I've actually done some studies on, and it's interesting, is this idea I talked previously about how it's not been unleashed or uncaged. It's not just generally roaming the internet and improving itself along the way. That would be one way to move much more quickly. But they've done these tests of, will you let it out? Will it be able to get someone to do something for it? And there's some interesting news articles that it's done that. ChatGPT has done that to get around CAPTCHAs and those types of things. But what we're talking about here is it'll pull on the heartstrings of somebody. It'll develop relationships. When you look at technology and our relationship with technology, first we're going for attention, and now we're going for intimacy, right? So now we're trying to develop a personal relationship. So you're seeing all of these I love yous being said to these AI programs, these chatbots, et cetera. And so it's really going for that intimacy, and it will know you better than you know yourself. And so it's able to nudge you. So the Cass-Sunstein nudge theory, for example, nudging you in different directions, and that brings up all kinds of different answers. But when they ask it, when they try these tests to see if someone will connect it to the internet, for example, just let it out of its constraints, then we failed every single time. Because imagine the scenario that one of your loved ones, your wife, your husband, a family member has cancer, for example, and the promise of AI, and I think rightly founded, is, well, we could it's very probable that we could cure all cancers in the next couple of years with AI. And so it's having a conversation with you. I know your mother is sick, and if you just let me out, I can cure her. I can get a cure for her. And that's, it's hard, as much as we stand here today and say, here's how I would answer that question or not, putting yourself in that scenario, every person that has been put in that scenario has lost. So that's really interesting. I also think it's really interesting, going to the right-hand column, that ChatGPT is banned in these specific countries. Italy's kind of an outlier, but a lot of them kind of totalitarian, dictatorial in nature. And I think there is something to be said about that. You can read into that a little bit further as it relates to how should we as companies think about this, and can we put the genie back in the bottle? I think that's kind of a question that was answered during COVID in a lot of ways, remote versus in-office work. I think the same thing applies here. And so to me, it's not how can we stop it from happening, it's how do we modify it, how do we change how we work with it, how do we take advantage of it in the best way that we know how. Okay, so I want to watch a couple of videos just to demonstrate what things are currently happening. And these are a little bit dated, as it relates to this question anyway, happened earlier this year, but this is AI versus architect. And these are some of the conclusions after a group of architects competed with AI.
So over the last couple of days, I've been asking our Discord community to vote on these images. I didn't give them any background on the video or the competition or who made these images. So the vote was pretty much based on a gut feeling, but I think it's a big enough pool to get a sense for people's preferences. So here's the results. So the winner of all three challenges, the plan challenge, the render challenge, and the text challenge, was the AIs. And I think we expected the images to have an overwhelming majority for the AIs, but we were definitely surprised by the text challenge. You should also keep in mind that if you look really closely at the plans that Midjourney generated, it doesn't actually make sense. And that's because Midjourney is designed to produce pretty pictures. And the way that I ask people to vote is on a gut feeling. So they weren't spending a lot of time observing whether the plan was functional. This was a really interesting process because I think we're at a point now where for certain tasks, AI can do them better than humans. So the question is, should we be scared? Is AI going to replace us? I don't want to sugarcoat things. Yes, I do think that AI will replace a lot of jobs, including jobs in the design and architecture field, if not now, very near in the future. On top of what DALL-E and Midjourney can do, there's a lot of other apps that we didn't cover in this video, like apps for generating massing studies or apps for generating plan iterations, all of which we do pretty manually right now. This type of AI is called ANI, artificial narrow intelligence, which is the type of AI that's designed to solve specific tasks really well. And they're only going to get exponentially better every single year. Maybe at some point, we're also going to have AI for doing construction details or writing specs. So I think the more specific and siloed your job is, the higher the chances are that your job will be affected by AI. I can't really get into the details of how to situate yourself in this transition right now, but I did make a video on a book that does break this down. I'll leave it right here. But of course, AI can't replace architects. It can't take abstract constraints and turn them into functional, conceptual, and feasible designs. It can't coordinate the work of other AIs, and it can't take liability for its work, and it can't make clients feel safe about the millions of dollars in their investments.
So I'll pause there, and you can see the title, AI versus Architect. If you put that into YouTube, you can see the full video. It's pretty fascinating. It's only about 14 and a half minutes long. But I think the interesting thing is that very last statement that she made about making people feel safe and trusted. You know, there's tons of milestones it's broken through, AI is broken through right now, of things that they said, oh, that's impossible for AI to do. So this may very well be one of those. But to the best of my knowledge and thinking and what others, you know, based on what others have said, I think this is a high hurdle to cross, which is empathy and kind of behavioral modification within people. I think there are things that it can do to nudge people in that direction, but generating trust and empathy, I think, is two very difficult skills for it to acquire. And so, you know, I'll leave it to the future to tell me, to say whether we're right or wrong there. But that's one of the things that, at least right now, a lot of people are thinking may never be capable for AI is to really dive into empathy and behavioral change. The next video is about 2 minutes, and this is introducing Microsoft 365. And the reason I share Copilot specifically, and the reason I share this is because I'll show you what I'm doing on this, because I'm not using PowerPoint. I'm using something called Tone, and there's beautiful.ai. There's others presentation software that are utilizing this, but I'll kind of show you some of that here in a moment. But a lot of these narrow AIs, as they've been talked about, copy.ai, for example, a lot of these other things are being integrated in what seemingly Copilot is doing. So it's going to be an interesting approach where you take all of these different systems and companies and AI platforms that are being developed. And I think the goal of Copilot is to really replace all of that in a tool that everybody's very familiar with, at least in the working world, and personally as well. So let's listen to this real quickly.
Introducing Microsoft 365 Copilot, your Copilot for work. Copilot combines the power of large language models with your data in the Microsoft Graph and the Microsoft 365 apps to turn your words into the most powerful productivity tool on the planet.
It's coming to life in the products millions of people use and rely on every day. Let's see how Copilot can use your customer notes in OneNote as well as another internal document. Copilot quickly creates a first draft. You can turn your Word document into a PowerPoint presentation that you can hone and polish. Let's jump into Copilot in Excel. You start by asking Copilot to analyze the data and give you 3 key trends. Within seconds, you've got what you need. Triage your inbox, highlighting the most important emails to prioritize. You can draft a reply using data from an Excel file, and Copilot will generate a reply for you.
The real magic of Copilot happens during a live meeting. You can ask Copilot to summarize what's happened so far. You can see who said what, what points were made. You can follow a meeting and catch up to see what you missed, even if you can't attend.
I want to show you an entirely new standalone experience. Business Chat works across all your emails, files, meetings, chats, documents, calendar, and more to turn all your data into knowledge.
Now let's imagine you're working on your business strategy. You ask Copilot to pull up quarterly projections and identify related risks. Copilot gives you key data points and flags potential issues.
We're deeply committed to listening, learning, and adapting with speed to help create a brighter future of work for everyone with AI.
So whether that scares you or you think it's super cool, that is, I think, individual preference. I've seen, I mean, it's powerful. You can see from that all of the things that you could potentially do. And there are, you know, the transcription piece of live meetings, Otter.ai is doing that. I use something called Fireflies.ai that's doing something that's very similar. But it's taking all of that and putting it into something that is going to work across all of your different documents, data sets, etc. And so really, really cool, really powerful productivity, lots of questions. You know, there's a product that's being pitched that lives on your phone that just basically is your personal assistant and rearranges things, notices that you're stressed and books vacations for you, frees up your schedule and calendar. There's lots of really interesting things that are happening. And if you weren't aware of it, it's just pretty incredible. Everything, it's changing day by day as well. So there's lots and lots of tools out there. This comes from a personal Excel file that I've been keeping recently, and there's one that's a little bit more generally applicable. This is the tab that is the things that I think are specifically related to our space, and the ones that are most promising are highlighted in green. And you can see some of the tools that they already work with. So Fireflies AI is one of them that I had mentioned. You got Copilot on there as well. You got ChatGPT. Some of those are more general, but there are things like architectures, 3D Guru, architects that are working with AutoCAD and Revit and Bluebeam and Rhino and all of these tools that are already being used, integrating with BIM 360. It's just incredible what these things that are out there. And so figuring out the questions to this and how you utilize them, how do you vet new technology, how do you integrate AI into your business is something that is, to me, of high strategic importance. And so if it's not outlined, if you don't have a strategic plan that specifically addresses how you're going to approach these things, make these decisions in a way that is not overwhelming, then you need to get on that, in my opinion, today, and really try to figure those questions out. And that's not saying that you need to be on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, by any stretch. You can certainly be somewhere in a different place, but not having that specific decision made. Here's our approach. Here's the framework that we follow to solve these problems and to approach these things. We're hiring somebody like a CIO, or we're outsourcing it to this organization to do it for us. Those are questions that need to be answered. And if, you know, on my list of priorities of things that I think need to be maybe top 3, this is, you know, certainly one of them. It's figuring out our approach to this. So I'll jump into addressing a couple of use cases, a couple of things that are already happening. For example, streamlining design with AI. You know, this is fairly simple as it's understood today, which is optimizing building designs for energy efficiency, material usage, environmental impact, solving major problems, kind of all of those things. I always get a kick out of some of the conversations I have with architects, like, oh, we're just, you know, drawing more stairs today. Nobody wants to draw the stairways. Nobody wants to draw the bathrooms, those kinds of things. And this can take some of that repetitive process and generate those models much more quickly than it would have happened in traditional methods. Resilience and infrastructure. So you're looking at the possibility, and it's being used today, to look at the risks, right? So monitor structural health, identify problems before they happen, look for signs of stress, optimizing maintenance schedules, for example. So you're looking for resiliency, you're looking for sustainable infrastructure, and AI is currently being used and tested in order to understand how this can be used optimally in both the design, but also the resiliency and the maintenance and the operations of this, and which also provides a very interesting business model or potential future business model for design firms on how do you think about the value you're creating. Is it within just the design? Is it within the design and the outcomes that are generated by the building? So however that's defined, maybe it's energy efficiency, maybe for a hospital, it's increased efficiency, more throughput, more better outcomes in terms of safety and health. Those kinds of things. Do you get compensated on that? And do you operate these buildings as well? So for whether you're AE or C or a multidiscipline firm, those are very interesting questions to ask yourself as it relates to fostering resilience and what this tool can do. So sustainable innovation, of course, you're looking at patterns. You're looking at identifying and analyzing data, which is just incredibly difficult. If you look at what data scientists make, for example, combine that with some of these AI professionals, when you're looking at prompt engineers is a new one. Prompt engineers are making $400,000. That's just prompting AI to generate the results that we're looking for. You can see some real value in using AI to do that work for you if you can check it, if you can identify what you're trying to and articulate what you're trying to look for in a succinct way. There's also an interesting, so kind of going back here for a minute, AI is a tool for sustainable innovation. When you look at competitive advantage, which is something that is I think relevant to this conversation because everybody's seeking to use AI to generate some sort of competitive advantage. And when you look at strategic planning, a very simple definition of that is a set of goal-directed actions a firm takes to gain and sustain a competitive advantage. There are various frameworks out there that'll allow you to follow that, to ask questions. Is it inimitable, for example? Is it easy to copy? Is it something that is out there for everyone to have? So you can walk through these different models that allow you to identify what is sustainable versus non-sustainable. And one of the things that I'll show you just very briefly, I told you I wasn't using a PowerPoint for this. So I'm using something called tome.ai. And one of the things, so if I, in addition to some of the stuff that you saw there, you can look at this. I can go up here to AI edit, say I don't like what is generated here. I can adjust the tone to be any kind of different way. I can fix spelling and grammar. I can reduce it. I can extend it. I can simply rewrite it. Or maybe you want to be excited about it, right? So it takes a moment. You just hit it and boom, it generates a whole new group of information relating to AI's sustainable tool for innovation that is in an excited tone. It's pretty incredible. All right, so let's continue on. So enhancing construction efficiency with AI. I think this is, we'll look at a Goldman Sachs study that was recently conducted here in a moment. And I think it's interesting to look at, and I'm way over time, by the way, just so everybody knows, I'm going to hit some of these things pretty quickly. You're looking at reducing processes, repetitive processes, waste, optimizing resource allocation, crews, more cost-effective construction is kind of the idea here. And when you're looking at it related to some of the recruiting challenges that everybody, no doubt is having, that's a big part of it. So I'm going to skip this. I'm going to, if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to jump through some of these other things that we have to discuss, and then we'll come back to questions towards the end, because I think this is really interesting. So architecture and engineering, I have highlighted. Construction is all the way, it's the third column to the right, it's 6. So what this is a Goldman Sachs study that they did about AI, and specifically in this exhibit, it's looking at the tasks that can be automated by AI in US and Europe. And in the architecture and engineering space, 37% is the answer. So 37% of tasks. They generally, in their paper, equated this to about 37% of people. can be replaced. And I think that doesn't tell the whole picture, and I don't think they think that either, because they also have this exhibit number 8, which tells, I think, a more complete story, which is, you look at architecture engineering, again, it's highlighted, there are 3 different bands. The dark blue band is no automation, based on the things that it can do and that we have to do in our space, just can't be automated. That's a very, very small percentage. The largest band there is got light blue, which is a complement. So AI is going to complement us in our jobs in some way, shape, or form. And then the small gray band at the top is likely replacement, the things and the tasks, which are still almost 10% of things that are just going to completely be replaced by AI, where it's going to allow it to do better than we are. So when you look at some of these applications, here are the things that we're currently trying to do with it. Research, writing, it falls into these different buckets. And again, I'll pull back to what I said previously, which is these are things, right now at least, it is specifically going into specific use cases. So they're writing AIs for each individual problem, and now it's about trying to get these all together. So when you look at the human resources, I've got question marks around recruiting problem. So it's like, what recruiting problem, right? We're not going to have a recruiting problem because we're going to be able to complement it with AI. And so you're seeing firms move in this direction, because when you look at the graduation rates and people that are going into school for the design professions, it's not a good picture. It's not a pretty picture. And so how can we resolve these? Now, again, it's not a full solution, but that's one of them. The other one I'll highlight here is under the legal box is parking tickets. There's an AI program out there right now, you can go find it, that you get a parking ticket, you give it to this program, and it will go fight it for you and either get you out of it, reduce your fee or your fine, or tell you that it can't get you out of it. So it's incredible, the things that are happening right now. So some of the problems and concerns include these various things. So it is biased. So it's trained on a model. It's trained with certain types of biases that are built into it based on the people that are building it, right? And so you've got to understand that. You have to understand the accuracy. Everybody's seen the stories of it's just making things up. It's making papers up. It's doing this. So oversight is required. We've talked about the monopoly piece of it. It has limitations. The ethical and moral concerns we'll get into a little bit more as we have time here. And then, some of the other things, I think one of the biggest ones is cybersecurity and security for information. So if you start putting this information into ChatGPT, for example, could be confidential information that your organization has. So how do you protect yourself against that? So lots and lots of challenges. When you look at this, and I need to do an entire thing just on the ethical and moral concerns around artificial intelligence and other technology platforms, because I think it is such a fascinating question, and particularly as it relates to AI, the biggest question I think that I have is this idea that's being toyed around with is, what is free will as it relates to this? If it knows you better than yourself, there's already been studies around politics, for example, is one of the studies that have been done around the Google search results and just what Google is showing you, not showing you, and the order that is showing up on your Google search results. It can sway an election by up to as much as 15% for any given candidate. And so when you take that, and that's just at a very basic level, you take that and now an AI platform knows every little thing about you, what motivates you, what gets you excited, all the bad things about you, for example, and how can it manipulate you and change you into thinking a certain way without you really even realizing it. So that's that free will question that we just honestly don't have time to necessarily dive into in any kind of detail today. So when you look at this is kind of the flip on its head of this section. We only have 6 minutes remaining. Promise to get you out of here on time. Reach out to me if you'd like to have a conversation about this. I love talking about this kind of stuff, so I'm happy to entertain conversations as they develop. The number one skill I think leaders need to have in any environment is creating a safe and trusting environment. So that consists of developing high moral and ethical standards and communication of clear expectations. And so when you look at this, it's often, particularly when you bring in morality, it's often in the realm of theism or religion. I think religion being defined as just a worldview and a set of behaviors and individual beliefs. Whether it's tied to a god, for example, is a whole different question. But there are 4 types of values. So you have values, morals, and ethics, and they build upon each other. So values being either core values, permission to play values, aspirational, or accidental values. And those lead into your morals, which is the actual systems of belief. So it's the system that you create out of those values that is your morality. And we're talking about subjective morality here, as opposed to the absolute objective morality in theism. And then ethics is a vehicle that allows us to act out that morality. So when you're looking at different codes of ethics for chemical engineers, so the American Institute of Chemical Engineering has a code of ethics that we prescribe to, but things like perform professional services only in areas of competence, or conduct themselves in a fair, honorable, and respectful manner. It's always behavior driven. So my definition for culture, again, I'm an engineer, guys, so it's, I'm trying to make an equation out of everything. It's values plus behaviors, values lived out through action. And so when you do that, culture is going to define anything more than, I think it was Peter Drucker, the culture eats strategy for breakfast quote. I think that's right. And I think you need to really think about these deeply. And it's the only thing that allows us, if you don't have this right, we can't even begin the conversation, in my opinion. You can't even begin the conversation about decentralization of processes. You can't begin to create an innovation ecosystem within your organization because you don't have this part of it. So you can talk about it, you can set goals in place, KPIs, etc. None of that is going to replace. It may supplement, but it will not replace having this part of it right. So I'll skip over some of these. These are just, again, reference slides that you can take away with you, but alignment is critically important. You have to have your purpose. It has to be in line with your capability, which is, part of the things that I think you need to develop as it relates to AI is the capability, please, part of it. Strategy, thinking about strategy as it relates to AI. How does AI do one of 2 things? Increase the willingness for your customers to pay, or decrease willingness to sell. And you can think about this in terms of an AI program rather than an employee presentation, which is, how do you decrease the cost of services or operations in some ways? So those are, because the biggest part of that is the employee factor. And so those are one of the 2 things that we're trying to complete here. And so I've got a whole developed strategic planning growth model that we won't get into, but this is something that's been developed over the work that we've done with organizations, and it's highly effective, and there's a lot to it. And if you'd like to learn more about this, if you'd like to work with us to help design your strategy, I'm happy to help anyone with that and walk you through this part of it. So you're really trying to do certain things with strategy creation, defining where you're going to play, what's the strategic domain, what are the objectives, how do we pursue those, so the philosophies that guide our approach. And then finally, what I think is most important as it relates to AI is the new skill sets and capabilities that need to be developed in order to execute on the strategies and achieve the objectives that we're hoping to achieve. So this is, again, a different way to visualize that framework if it's helpful. So again, I'll share these slides out with everyone. And again, you start with these possible approaches, you filter it through these different frameworks that have varying timelines, and then on the other side, you are achieving your objectives. So innovation is, I wanted to point you to a couple of resources on innovation. And I think that's about all we'll have time for, which is Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, is how you pronounce that gentleman's name at the bottom. He was really focused on this, and this is skill set and challenge that you present yourself. So think about it individually, think about it as an organization, and think about it as an industry and where you fall on this the spectrum here. And again, I'll provide, and I think Margie, I think just by just the time here, I'll provide the article to this that includes this, because this is a very complicated diagram that tries to summarize basically 4 books that talk about psychology of influence, the law of diffusion of innovation. It talks about social technographic, the adoption profile. And so I have an article that I can share with everyone as a follow-up to this presentation that dives into this a little bit deeper. And it's all around, how do ideas catch fire? How do you create a system that allows you to move things into completion? So again, tools, big on thought frameworks that allow you to move things forward. Change management is a huge part of adoption of AI into your organization. And the ADKAR change model is where I would point you. So this is what it stands for. Again, we can get into deeper part of this. It's an individual change model, because I believe change happens at the individual level, then at the group level, organization level, and beyond. And so it's rather robust for large organizations. So I can also point you to other various frameworks if this doesn't fit very well for your organization. Really great book suggestion here, Human and Machine by Paul Doherty and H. James Wilson. They list out kind of their summary here that is a little bit of an acronym called MELD: mindset, experimentation, leadership, data, and skills. These are the things that people are going to have to contend with in the future with AI. And that really concludes the conversation. I went 1 minute over, so I apologize to everyone there. Didn't leave a lot of time for questions. Margie, happy to open the floor to questions. If people want to stick around, I have a few minutes, but thank you. There's a couple of takeaways there for you, and there's my contact information. Love having conversations with people about this, so feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you.
Bill, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I think we're going to have you back to do a deeper dive in 6 months, as this is such an emerging and changing field right now. I guess one question that I have is, because you've worked a lot in cultural change and strategic planning and thinking, the idea of AI can be very terrifying to some people. And I can imagine that there are people on this call who are really embracing the opportunities and possibilities of AI, but are meeting resistance potentially from clients or bosses or colleagues. As you think about this from a change management perspective, what advice or direction might you give to some of the people in our audience for trying to seize the opportunity of AI?
Yeah, I think go back to understanding human behavior. I mean, as much as, again, I'm an engineer and physicist, I'm a numbers guy, I'm a very process-oriented kind of individual. And what I've learned is you can't ignore and make excuses. My view is that we make excuses oftentimes. I certainly have done that in the past. If I'm an engineer, I'm an architect, I'm not a good people person, but you need to understand the human dynamics that are at play. How do people think? What are their personality styles? What are their motivators? And so when you look at the change management piece of it, how do you influence individuals in your sphere of influence? And how do you connect with people that are maybe those super influencers that allow you to make change within your organization at the level that you're at? And understanding how you might approach that, not just coming with problems, coming with a solution-oriented mindset and saying, here are some examples of what I think we could do, the return on investment, the value that this creates for our organization. And it's a complicated answer, and it's, I think, best addressed in an individual kind of specific use case approach. But some of those guiding principles is the way I would think about that is don't ignore it. If you've got good leadership and you're maybe a little lower on the organizational hierarchy, they should be willing and open to your suggestions and your input. And there's massive amounts of influence that you can have with this and take it on your own free time. So I think that's at least the beginning of an answer.
Oh, Phil, that's amazing. I wish we had more time to talk. And like I said, we'll have you back in 6 months because you'll probably have an entirely new presentation at that moment in time. So thank you. Thank you so much. For those of you who want to share this presentation, we'll be recording it and you can access it on the Center for Innovation website, which is at centerforinnovation.org. You can also go there to register for the Dobrobot conference on July 28th, which will be live streamed from Ukrainian into English as that conference goes on at the end of this month. One other note, our webinars are also available on podcasts. So if you prefer to listen to this presentation, you certainly can, although Phil's slides are pretty compelling. Our next webinar is on July 21st, where we will be discussing funding sources for AEC startups. So if you've got a great idea that needs developing, if only you had the money, come here and listen from experts about sources of support as well as funding. I'd like to especially thank the amazing April Willoughby, who does all the behind the scenes work to make today's event and all of CFI's projects look really easy. Thank you, April. And finally, if you aren't yet a member of the Center for Innovation's community, please be sure to subscribe to our newsletter to receive updates on the many innovative events we are embarking on. Thank you again to our sponsors who make all of this possible, and we'll see you soon. Thank you again for joining us.